Welcome back to CIA Declassified. For a clandestine operative, the ocean is often a means of entry or an escape route, but for the Central Intelligence Agency in 1952, the ocean was a massive, untamable barrier to survival. If a pilot was downed over the Pacific or a maritime team was stranded after a failed insertion, they were surrounded by water they couldn't drink. Dehydration isn't just a physical toll, it's a psychological one. It leads to delirium, poor decision making, and eventually the compromise of the mission. On the desk of the Technical Services Division, TSD, sat a problem of chemistry based on document number CIA RDP78-03425A00190001. 0001-6, the agency wasn't looking for a large-scale desalination plant. They were looking for something small, stable, and secret. A chemical kit that could turn a cup of brine into a cup of life. Fact check. The primary focus of this research was Project Survival. The agency sought to improve upon the existing kits used in World War II, which were bulky and often produced water that was still dangerously high in silver ions. The technical specifications outlined in the declassified memos are grueling. The ideal solution had to function in temperatures ranging from subarctic to tropical humidity. It had to be light enough to be carried in a standard survival vest without attracting the attention of enemy search parties. Most importantly, the resulting water had to be chemically indistinguishable from fresh water to avoid causing long-term kidney damage to valuable personnel. The heart of the experiment was the, quote, desalting kit, Seawater, individual, end quote. The TSD researchers were obsessed with, quote, ion exchange resins, end quote. These are essentially chemical filters that swap the sodium and chloride ions in seawater for something harmless. A quote, the requirement exists for a compact, reliable method of producing potable water from seawater. Current methods yield a product with high residual silver content, which poses a secondary toxicity risk to the user during prolonged survival scenarios, end quote. The document reveals a frantic pace of testing. They weren't just testing the chemistry, they were testing the packaging. If the chemical brick cracked, it was useless. If the bag leaked, the operative died. They ran stress tests involving simulated parachute drops and high-pressure underwater caches. But there was a darker side to the testing. To find the limits of these chemicals, the agency needed to know exactly how much residual toxicity a human body could handle before the cure became worse than the thirst. The agency's technical services staff worked closely with military medical officers to monitor subject tolerance. In the early 1950s, this often involved monitoring volunteers who were placed on restricted intake diets. The declassified logs show a granular focus on urine output, electrolyte balance, and the mental acuity of subjects who were essentially being slowly dehydrated and then rescued by experimental chemical water. The goal was to find the break-even point, the exact moment where the chemical byproduct of the desalination process would begin to cause neurological symptoms. Before we reach the redactions, we must consider the raw data recovered from the TSD laboratories. The agency was particularly concerned with the shelf life of these resins under extreme duress. A fact, internal memos within the RDP78 file indicate that the agency tested the kit's endurance against fungal growth and high humidity dead drops. They discovered that in tropical climates, the organic components of the ion exchange resins became a breeding ground for local bacteria, effectively turning a survival tool into a biological hazard within 6 months of deployment. A quote, it is imperative that the final packaging be impervious to both saline corrosion and microbiological infiltration, as the introduction of pathogens during the desalination process would negate the survival advantage, end quote. There's also a section regarding taste masking. The agency found that the chemical process left a metallic, bitter aftertaste that caused subjects to involuntarily vomit, a catastrophic outcome for someone already suffering from dehydration. Speculation. Some analysts speculate that the agency's focus on palatability was not merely for the comfort of the agent, but to ensure that the chemical kit could be used to facilitate the ingestion of other secret additives. If the water tasted off by nature of the desalination, an agent could easily hide the taste of a sedative or a stimulant without raising suspicion among those that might be sharing the water with. A fact, the documents reveal a partnership with the National Bureau of Standards. The CIA wasn't just working in a vacuum. They were leveraging civilian scientific bodies to validate their survival quotants, often under the guise of, quote, standard Navy equipment development, end quote, to hide the agency's specific interest in the tech. Speculation. In the realm of speculation, there are whispers regarding Project MK Naomi. Given that this project coincided with the TSD's desalination work, it is theorized that the agency explored inverse desalination, the ability to create a substance that, when added to a freshwater supply, would chemically mimic the pressure of seawater, effectively dehydrating anyone who drank from a town's well while leaving the water looking perfectly clear. When you look at the middle section of this document, the technical flow stops abruptly. The speculation. Following a successful report on resin stability, there is a 5-page block of redactions. Historians and whistleblowers have speculated that these pages contain the field testing data. Unlike laboratory tests with willing volunteers, it is suspected that these trials were conducted on unwitting subjects, perhaps maritime prisoners or foreign detainees in coastal black sites. The redactions are particularly dense around the discussion of, quote, containment injection, end quote. There is speculation that the agency wasn't just looking to clean water, they were looking to see if these kits could be inverted. If you could chemically treat water to make it drinkable, could you also create a sabotage kit that looked like a survival tool but actually introduced slow-acting toxins into the enemy's water supply? The term area denial appears just before a redacted paragraph, suggesting that the research may have branched into hydrological warfare, the ability to render an island's or a base's water supply unusable for the enemy while keeping it viable for agency assets. Further speculation points towards Subproject 14, which allegedly explored the use of these resins as a carrier for behavioral modification drugs. The idea was that an operative, while purifying their water in front of a captive or an informant, could also dose the water with LSD or BZ. The redactions hide the results of these social ingestion tests. If the agency could prove that the desalination process effectively masked the taste and color of psychoactive compounds, they would have a perfect delivery system for truth serums in a survival or maritime interrogation setting. In the world of the CIA, success is a relative term. Did they create a perfect survival kit? Analysis. The project was considered a technical success, but an operational failure. While the chemists managed to reduce the silver ion content by 40%, the kits remained too sensitive to environmental degradation. In high-heat environments, the very places where you need water most, the resins began to break down, releasing noxious gases into the storage bags. However, the agency viewed the toxicological data as an immense win. They had mapped the human body's response to mineral imbalances more thoroughly than any civilian organization at the time. The data was immediately compartmentalized and moved into other more aggressive research programs. The internal memos suggest that while the individual kit was phased out in favor of better mechanical solar stills, the chemical formulas were retained for specialized use cases. This is agency speak for operations where the weight of the equipment was more important than the long-term health of the user, specifically for one-way missions behind the Iron Curtain or in the maritime borders of North Korea. The ghost of Project Survival lives on in your everyday life. Technological breakthroughs, the ion exchange research funded by the CIA in this document contributed significantly to the development of modern domestic water filtration. Every time you use a charcoal or resin-based filter in your kitchen, you are using technology that was refined, in part, to keep a 1950s spy from dying of thirst in the South China Sea. Operational breakthroughs. The project changed changed how the agency approached logistic caching. They developed the first environmental stable packaging, materials that could survive being buried in sand or submerged in salt water for years without degrading. This allowed the CIA to pre-position survival supplies across the globe, creating a hidden infrastructure of support that could be activated by an operative with nothing but a map and a code. Furthermore, the research into potability standards helped the agency establish what they called the interrogation hydration protocol. By understanding the exact point at which thirst breaks a human's will, the agency was able to calibrate their environmental pressures during questioning. This wasn't just about water, it was about the science of human endurance. By the late 1960s, the focus shifted to reverse osmosis. The chemical bricks of the TSD were relegated to the archives, but the documents remain, a testament to a time when the CIA believed that even the chemistry of the ocean could be bent to the will of the state. Next time on CIA Declassified, we move from the depths of the ocean to the edge of space. The quest for survival takes a high-speed, high-altitude turn. We will be examining Project Gusto. While the public was focused on the U-2, the CIA was already working on its successor, the A-12 Oxcart. We analyzed the declassified records of the anti-radar experiments, the birth of stealth technology. It wasn't just about flying fast, it was about becoming invisible. We'll look at the Project Rainbow failures and the terrifying human factors of flying at Mach 3. Join us next time for The Invisible Wing. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.